Citroen's C3 Super Mini has always focused on comfort and value, along with an extra dash of the kind of innovation we expect from this enduring French brand. Now, in tune with the times, it's also very efficient. This revised, smarter second-generation version gets a clever range of 3-cylinder PureTech engines that transform its petrol proposition, plus a clutch of AirDream micro-hybrid diesel models that cost just pennies to run. The result still isn't sporty, but as before, the ride's great, the interior's smart, and the boot's practical. The C3, it seems, has come of age. Citroen knows a thing or two about small family cars, especially those with a dash or two of character. Here, after all, is the marque that over 60 years ago brought us the iconic 2CV, a model which established its maker as an innovator, an embracer of technology, and a brand in tune with the fickle finger of fashion. Over the years, we've seen further moments of shining innovation, design bravery, and unadulterated quirkiness, but never really amongst Citroen Super Minis. The 90s Saxo was a rebadged Peugeot 106, whilst its first-generation C3 successor was flimsy and forgettable. In this second-generation C3, though, we've a very different proposition. It isn't a current-day 2CV, but it's about as innovative as a practically sized 5-door modern Super Mini is ever gonna get, and therefore a proper Citroen. This is the lightly revised, sleeker-looking version we first saw in the spring of 2013, and as before, it shares engines and underpinnings with similarly sized Peugeot models, which is important to know as it explains why this facelift really has transformed this car. In the spring of 2012, Peugeot introduced their all-new 208 Super Mini, complete with a high-tech range of 1-litre and 1.2-litre 3-cylinder petrol engines. This improved C3 gets all the same technology, which means that at last it has a credible petrol engine lineup. Previously, you had to stretch to a pricey HDI diesel if you wanted a really efficient version of this car. If Citroen can get that message across to potential buyers, it could make all the difference to their sales prospects in this segment. This model is, after all, already rather refreshing in its refusal to prioritise the sportiness that other manufacturers seem to feel is necessary in their small runabouts. The French brand has its more dynamic 3-door DS3 line to provide that, leaving this 5-door C3 to create its own distinct, more laid-back market niche as something smartly fashionable that offers higher quality and greater comfort than a Fiesta without the potential priciness of a Polo. Sounds tempting? Then join me as we put this French contender to the test. Small French cars used to ride beautifully, grip tenaciously, and flow from corner to corner with relaxed, unflustered motion, as by and large this one does. It may come as news to some motoring journalists, but most Super Mini buyers don't routinely want to throw their cars about as if they were on a stage from the RAC Rally. What most of them would prefer is a model that rolls the red carpet over the average appallingly surfaced British road, as this one does. The trick, which Citroen hasn't always mastered, is to offer this without inducing the kind of body roll and handling woolliness that removes any element of enjoyment from the driving experience altogether. In this respect, this impressively refined C3 is a world away from its first-generation predecessor and has been further improved in this enhanced guise, with an increase in the anti-roll bar rates by about 15% and an increase in the damping rates by about 20%. So it won't roll and wallow as much as before. True, a Ford Fiesta is still a tauter, more eager proposition for enthusiastic drivers, but this is the car I think a significant number of people would prefer to live with day in, day out, though I would say that on longer trips the seats could do with a little more support. On the open road, you might also wish that the power steering had a bit more feel, but it comes into its own around town, where you appreciate the light gearbox and clutch as much as the tight 10.2 metre turning circle that will help owners out of many a tight spot, as will a good field of vision around the car, helped by the low window line, and on top models the clever panoramic Zenith windscreen that I have here. As for the changes to this improved second generation version, well, most of them lie beneath the bonnet. Citroen has been able to borrow the light, revvy little 3-cylinder PureTech petrol engines that add so much spark to Peugeot's rival 208 Super Mini, and they really transform this car's buying proposition for green pump buyers. First up is a 1 litre 68 brake horsepower unit that needs to be revved quite hard if you're to get anywhere near the quoted performance figures. Rest to 62 miles an hour in 14.2 seconds en route to just 101 miles an hour. Much better is the 1.2 litre 82 brake horsepower version of this unit, the variant that I'm trying here. Now, this delivers the same distinctive 3-cylinder thrum, but accompanies it with pokier performance. 62 miles an hour from rest, taking 12.3 seconds on the way to 108 miles an hour. It's a pity you only get the 5-speed manual gearbox though. On the open road, this car would be much more relaxing with a 6-speed. These two 3-cylinder engines occupy the sweet spot in the C3 lineup, but for the sake of completeness, I'll mention that the PSA Group's older VTI petrol engines, a 95 brake horsepower 1.4 and a 120 brake horsepower 1.6 litre, also live on further up the range, mainly to cater for green pump buyers who want an automatic gearbox option, though in neither case is the self-shifter ideal. With a 1.4, it's Citroen's CVT belt-driven EGS 6-speed setup that's efficient but can be jerky. The 1.6 litre model's older 4-speed auto is of the more conventional kind, so it's smoother but relatively thirsty and dirty. If you really must have some kind of automatic gearbox in your C3, it's probably better to order it with a diesel engine, but in that case you'll be limited to the pricier of the two 70 brake horsepower 1.4 litre HDI units, the so-called eHDI 70 AirDream EGS variant. Quite a mouthful, designating quite a lot of technology that includes conditional use of the rather jerky EGS auto gearbox I just mentioned. And that transmission also rather dulls the performance. To give you an idea of just how much, I'll tell you that if you order your C3 with the same 1.4 litre HDI engine, but mate it with a conventional manual gearbox, you'll get yourself to 62 miles an hour in 13.5 seconds, nearly 3 seconds faster. Want more diesel performance? You'd really need to be a higher mileage driver to justify it. For those that are, Citroen provides two 1.6 litre HDI units, offering either 90 or 115 brake horsepower. Both are suitably fettled with the AirDream eHDI micro-hybrid technology I just mentioned, but in this case, both come with proper manual gearboxes, a 5-speeder for the 90 and a 6-speeder for the 115. Be quick with the stick in each case and you'll manage the 62 miles an hour sprint in times of 11.3 seconds and 9.7 seconds respectively. It's quite smart, isn't it? With sleeker looks that were improved by this car's mid-life facelift, an update that brought a bolder front end emphasised by this double chevron grille. Owners of the original second generation version may also notice trendy LED daytime running lights and this body coloured splitter in the lower air intake. At the rear there are sleeker tail lights and some neat reflectors fitted to the bumper. So much for the detail stuff. Interestingly, this C3 is almost identical in size to the Super Mini sales leader, Ford's Fiesta, but from there the similarities cease. Ford went for angular window lines and a dynamic drive. Citroen, in contrast, prefers to target buyers who favour a more laid-back life, not only in terms of this car's softer ride, but also in styling that prioritises an airier, more spacious feeling, more comfortable cabin. So you've got this short, steeply rising bonnet, this arcing roofline, and side windows that fall lower than the bonnet line. And most notably, you've got this large frontal glass area that on top models can feature something that's really quite unique. Let me show you. Looks quite ordinary, doesn't it? The view out from behind the wheel. Get yourself a C3 like this one, fitted with the so-called panoramic zenith windscreen, and it can be anything but. Push up this sun visor, and your normal upward 28-degree angle of vision is increased to a massive 108 degrees. A better view out, in fact, than you'd get roofed down in a convertible, where the windscreen rail is usually directly above your head. Now, practically, it means that you don't have to crane your neck up when, for example, you're first in the queue at the traffic lights. Subjectively, it does wonders in increasing the light, airy feeling of the cabin. The extended glass section is progressively tinted so that the top of your head won't be. But if you really don't like it, you can pull the sun visor back down again to the point where the top of the roof would normally be. This feature gives the car a welcome feeling of spaciousness that isn't borne out by the tape measure. In fact, at well under 4 metres long, it's one of the shortest Super Minis you can buy. Quite impressive then that this C3 still manages to offer up quite adequate interior space, or at least the feeling of adequate interior space. Now, some of this is smoke and mirrors, the light, airy atmosphere created by the bulbous roof and low window line, for example. And some of it's created by selective prioritisation. So, for example, you get this recessed lower dash that gives the front passenger a lot of knee room, but at the expense of a tiny glove box. So much for the design semantics. What you can't argue about is the quality of this cabin in comparison to the tackiness of the small Citroen models we all grew up with, though I don't really understand why in a car as resolutely unsporting as this one, there's a flat-bottomed steering wheel. Still, at least the model in which such a thing would be more appropriate, the French brand's more upmarket DS3 hot hatch, has provided many elements of the interior trim. So there are classy analogue instruments now with smarter white backlit dials, plus solid, expensive looking plastics. Flashes of chrome to liven things up, and a neat strip across the dashboard that's available in a selection of colours. Everything flows together. Nothing looks like an afterthought. In fact, so solid does it all feel, and so few are the kind of giveaway rattles that often plagued the first generation model, that it's something of a surprise to learn that this C3 is 50 kilograms lighter than the original one. Take a seat in the back, and as usual with a car in this class, there's space for 2 adults or 3 children to sit comfortably. Knee room is slightly below average, but aided by the slim design of the front seat backs, plus the semi-raised position of those front seats creates decent space under them for your feet. It's also notable that thanks to the domed roof, headroom is a little better than you would expect. If you happen to be sitting behind the front seat passenger, you're likely to have more legroom, as the recessed dash I mentioned earlier will enable that front seat occupant to sit further forward. Out back, and rather astonishingly given the tight exterior dimensions, you'll find one of the largest luggage bays in the Super Mini segment, though there's quite a high loading lip to negotiate before you can access it. At 300 litres in size, it's 10% bigger than a Fiesta'S Boot and offers nearly as much room as you'd find in a Ford Focus from the next class up. Certainly there's enough capacity here to take a single bulky suitcase or a pushchair. Now, for ultimate carriage capacity, you can of course push forward the split folding rear bench that's standard on all models, and although it doesn't go quite flat, it does fold to reveal 1,121 litres of fresh air. List pricing suggests that you'll be paying somewhere in the £11,000 to £17,000 bracket across the 5-door only C3 lineup. That's par for the course amongst Super Minis, but of course Citroen dealers are well renowned for their readiness to sharpen their pencils. At the bottom of the range, there's quite a large £2,000 premium to go from the base 1 litre petrol version to the base 1.4 litre HDI diesel. The HDI model coming with a £13,000 price tag that might be better spent on the almost as frugal VTI 82 petrol variant that I'm trying here. Further up the range, the eHDI AirDream micro-hybrid diesel engines are impressively efficient, but choices here don't begin until you get above £15,000. Whichever flavour of pump you choose to fill from, automatic motoring requires a premium of around £1,000 over comparable manual models. So how does that leave this car as a value proposition in the closely fought Fiesta and Corsa dominated super mini market? Well, let's have a look. I'll get to Ford and Vauxhall in a minute, but before I do, I'd suggest that the most obvious point of comparison is with Peugeot's 208, a car which is essentially identical to this one under the skin, but list price wise costs a few £100 less model for model. Nothing your Citroen dealer couldn't match though. Choice between a 208 and a C3 will, I think, largely come down to personal preference. In the Citroen's favour is a slightly bigger boot, the cleverness of the optional panoramic zenith windscreen, and a more conventional driving position. After all, not everyone gets on with the tiny steering wheel and raised instruments you get in a 208. Beyond Peugeot, there are of course a vast number of different super mini options. Renault's Clio is priced very closely against this car, but doesn't offer as wide a range of engines. You might also be tempted by comparably priced rivals like Volkswagen's Polo and Kia's Rio, but with both of these two, the boot space is a little less, and by and large the engine's a little less responsive. Your first thoughts though will probably be towards the two UK market leaders in this segment, Ford's Fiesta and Vauxhall's Corsa, cars that are actually list priced quite ambitiously. A number of Fiesta and Corsa variants are listed at up to £1,000 more than equivalent C3 models, and at entry level that means beginning your negotiations at well over £12,000 rather than the £11,000 starting point that Citroen demands. That could make a difference for some budget buyers. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is a C3 that you really want, then you're going to want to know exactly what comes included in the asking price. A reasonable amount is the answer. Whichever model you opt for, 1 litre or 1.2 litre 3-cylinder petrol, 1.4 or 1.6 litre HDI diesel, or even the older 1.4 and 1.6 litre VTI petrol units, whichever of those you go for, you should find this Citroen to be decently equipped, because all models get a good quality CD stereo with at least 4 speakers, steering wheel mounted controls and an aux-in socket, power front windows and mirrors, split folding rear seats, a height adjustable driver's seat, a multifunction trip computer and a 12-volt socket. For air conditioning though, you'll need a mid-range VTR Plus model, like the one I have here. A trim level recognisable from its LED daytime running lights and 15-inch alloy wheels, while inside you get cruise control with a speed limiter and what Citroen calls connecting box technology, which gives you Bluetooth and USB connectivity. You'll have to pay extra for the panoramic zenith windscreen though, unless you get the very plushest variants. And as usual in Citroen models, there's the option of eMyWay satellite navigation. Plus, I'd want to tick the box for the personalised air freshener option for the cabin, which comes with a choice of fragrances. You can also order a reverse parking camera. As for safety, it's disappointing that ESP stability control and curtain airbags aren't fitted as standard to the most affordable variants, though of course both are available if you tick the right boxes or stretch to a plusher model. However, as you'd expect, twin front and side airbags are standard, as are rear Isofix child seat fastenings. You also get an ABS braking system with emergency braking assistance to aid in panic stops advertised to following drivers by automatically activating hazard warning flashes. Almost every fashionable type of technology has been thrown at this car to drive its running costs down. but as usual you won't find all of it across the range. Most of the eco features are reserved for eHDI AirDream diesel models, cars that feature what Citroen likes to call a micro-hybrid system. Now, don't be confused by that. We're not talking here of a Prius-like hybrid. Instead, the terminology refers to a 5-volt supercapacitor, which stores electric power and, along with a reversible alternator, helps the car's regular battery to restart the engine when the standard stop-start system cuts it, when not needed in urban traffic or at the lights. Along with regenerative braking, that helps this car achieve significant fuel savings of up to 83.1 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and as little as 87 grams per kilometre of CO2. You'll need a C3 equipped with the rather jerky EGS 6-speed automatic gearbox if you are to achieve figures as low as those, which means you have to order the least powerful 70 brake horsepower 1.4 litre eHDI AirDream EGS model. To give you an idea of just how much difference this special transmission and the AirDream micro-hybrid technology make, well, I'll tell you that without it, an ordinary manual gearbox C3 1.4 HDI 70 can manage no more than 74.3 miles to the gallon and 99 grams per kilometre. Further up the C3 diesel range, the pokier 1.6 litre eHDI models are manual only, but even without the efficiency benefits of the EGS Auto Box, they're still pretty frugal. The eHDI 90 AirDream variant manages 78.5 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 95 grams per kilometre of CO2, whilst thanks to the fitment of an extra 6-speed in the gearbox, the top eHDI 115 AirDream variant isn't far behind, delivering 74.4 miles to the gallon and 99 grams per kilometre. Not that you have to have a diesel to minimise your running costs in this car. That certainly used to be the case when this second generation C3 was first launched. The old 1.4 and 1.6 litre VTI petrol engines that still continue from that time aren't notably frugal. The 1.6 VTI unit, for example, returning 49.6 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 132 grams per kilometre of CO2. It's a very different story though if, as I'd suggest, you confine your attention to the 1 litre and 1.2 litre PureTech petrol units introduced with the revised version of this model. As many as 52 patents were filed in the development of these engines to help bring down weight and bulk, optimise combustion and reduce friction, with the aim of improving fuel and CO2 efficiency by around 25%. A lot of work, but it's paid off. The entry-level 68 brake horsepower 1 litre unit delivers 65.7 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 99 grams per kilometre of CO2, while even the far pokier 1.2 litre VTI 82 brake horsepower unit I'm trying here manages 61.4 miles to the gallon and 107 grams per kilometre. It all means that at last in a C3, petrol power could make the most sense, unless you really do cover a high annual mileage. What else? Well, service intervals are every 20,000 miles unless you plump for a 1.6 litre HDI diesel, in which case your garage visits are going to have to be rather more frequent, every 12,500 miles. Also bear in mind that should you specify the clever extended panoramic zenith windscreen that I've got here, then be unfortunate enough to experience serious stone chip damage, it'll be fearsomely expensive to replace. And residual values? Well, they won't be anything to write home about, but they'll probably be no worse than those of comparable mainstream brand Super Mini rivals. Insurance groupings range between 8 and 21. The improved version of this second generation C3 Super Mini is a far more viable prospect, and that's mainly due to the fresh options it offers under the bonnet. Most looking at a car of this kind come in search of super efficient petrol power. Now previously this Citroen couldn't offer it, but with the clever PureTech 3-cylinder petrol options now available, that's been properly put right. With this technology in place, it's high time small car buyers took a fresh look at what's on offer here. True, as Super Minis go, this isn't an orthodox choice, but then that's part of its appeal. In time-honoured Citroen fashion, a C3 is just that little bit different, with smart, slightly quirky looks and, if specified, that uniquely clever extended windscreen. Best of all, instead of adopting the little big car approach favoured by many rivals and ending up feeling like a scaled-down family hatchback, this model manages the same thing in a cleverer, more compact package by simply making better use of the space it has to offer. Citroen's MPV expertise doubtless helps here. What it lacks in driving dynamism, it makes up for in quality, refinement and a cosseting ride. Indeed, I can think of few sensibly sized small cars that are better suited to urban motoring than this one. Overall then, the C3 is at last a strong contender in the super mini marketplace. Best of all, perhaps, it's a car that's distinctively Citroen.